He cut me off mid-sentence, and in front of a $1 million client. Right then, I promised myself this wouldn't end the way he thought. If you've ever been humiliated in front of clients or looked down on by a new boss, stay until the end. Because real revenge isn't always about one big explosion, it's about making them realize, day by day, just how wrong they were. My name is Madeline Foster, and I've spent the last 7 years at Silverpine Structural Solutions proving that talent speaks louder than connections. At 32, I'd earned my position as lead engineer through countless late nights, innovative solutions, and a determination to be judged by my work alone, not by who my father was. The conference room on the 42nd floor had never felt smaller than it did that Tuesday morning. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, but all I could focus on was the presentation remote trembling slightly in my hand. Not from nerves, I'd present it to bigger clients, but from pure, unfiltered rage. As you can see from the stress distribution models, I continued, clicking to the next slide showing the new bridge optimization framework I'd developed. We can reduce material costs by 18% while actually increasing load capacity by... That's quite enough. Nathan Drake's voice cut through my presentation like a blade. Our new technical director, 5 months into his reign of mediocrity, stood up from his seat at the head of the table. His Armani suit was perfectly pressed, his smile perfectly condescending, and his timing perfectly calculated to humiliate. Gentlemen, he addressed the 3 representatives from the city's infrastructure committee, completely ignoring the woman among them. I apologize for this enthusiasm. We don't typically let our junior staff propose theoretical frameworks in front of serious clients. Junior staff. The words hung in the air like a slap. 7 years. Lead engineer. 43 successful projects. And he'd just reduced me to junior staff in front of a contract worth 8 figures. Mrs. Patricia Huang, the infrastructure committee's chief advisor, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She'd been taking notes during my presentation, genuinely engaged. Now she looked between Nathan and me with barely concealed confusion. But the optimization model seems quite, she began, is exactly the kind of academic exercise we need to move past. Nathan interrupted smoothly, his Princeton class ring catching the light as he gestured dismissively. What Silverpine offers is proven methodology, not textbook theories from employees who haven't yet grasped the complexities of real-world implementation. My knuckles went white around the remote. Every word was calculated to diminish not just my presentation, but my very presence in that room. The portfolio tucked under my arm, 5 years of successfully implemented projects, suddenly felt like it weighed nothing at all. Mr. Drake. I kept my voice steady, professional, though inside I was screaming. This framework is based on the Canton Bridge project, which the team completed under proper supervision. He cut me off again, this time with a patronizing chuckle. I'm sure your contributions were noted somewhere in the documentation. Now, if you could gather your materials and let the adults continue this discussion. The adults. As if I were a child playing dress-up in my charcoal blazer and heels. As if the calculations on that screen weren't the product of years of expertise. As if I hadn't saved this company millions with my innovations while Nathan was still pushing paper at his previous firm. I saw it then, in the way his eyes glinted with satisfaction. This wasn't about the presentation or the clients. This was about power. About putting me in what he considered my place. He'd been threatened from day one by anyone who actually understood the technical side of our business, and now he'd found his perfect moment to strike. The city representatives exchanged glances. Mr. Davidson, the senior member, cleared his throat. Perhaps we could hear the rest of... I'll personally walk you through our proven solutions. Nathan interrupted yet again, already moving to take my place at the front of the room. Miss Foster, the materials. Miss Foster. Not Engineer Foster, not even Madeline. Just Miss Foster, like I was a secretary from the 1950s. I gathered my presentation materials with movements so controlled they felt robotic. Every fiber of my being wanted to tell him exactly what he could do with his condescension. to inform everyone in that room that while Nathan Drake was failing his engineering boards for the third time, I was revolutionizing load distribution algorithms. That while he was playing golf with executives, I was in the field, hands dirty, making sure our structures would stand for generations. But I didn't. Because that's what he wanted, an emotional outburst he could point to later. See? Too emotional for leadership, too reactive for client meetings. Instead, I straightened my spine, looked him directly in the eye, and smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile that promised this wasn't over. Of course, Mr. Drake, I said, my voice sweet enough to rot teeth. I'll leave you to explain the technical specifications of the framework. I'm sure your extensive theoretical knowledge will suffice. The slight emphasis on theoretical made him blink. He didn't have the first clue about the actual mathematics behind my proposal. We both knew it. As I walked toward the door, heels clicking against the marble floor, I heard Mrs. Huang ask, "But who developed this framework?" I paused at the threshold, hand on the door handle, and waited. "Our team," Nathan replied smoothly. "Silver Pine's team." That's when I made my promise, not out loud, not dramatically, but in the quiet certainty of my own mind. Nathan Drake had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He thought he'd put me in my place, but all he'd done was declare war. And he had no idea who he was really dealing with. The mahogany desk in my office had belonged to 3 lead engineers before me, but the frame holding my doctorate had always been turned face down. Next to it, hidden beneath project files, lay a photograph I rarely looked at anymore. My father and me at the Millau Viaduct inauguration. Harold Foster, the man whose revolutionary cable-stayed designs had transformed European infrastructure, smiling proudly at his 20-year-old daughter. I'd spent 12 years making sure no one connected that man to me. Rough meeting? Grace Holden peered around my door, her concern genuine. At 26, she was brilliant, innovative, and currently watching her composite materials project gathered dust because Nathan deemed it too experimental. Nathan's usual performance, I replied, pulling up the client meeting notes on my screen. Apparently, I'm too junior to present theories to serious clients. Grace's face darkened. He did the same to Marcus last month, and to Jennifer before that. Anyone who actually knows what they're talking about gets shut down. She was right. In 5 months, Nathan Drake had systematically diminished every competent engineer in the company, surrounding himself instead with yes-men who wouldn't challenge his limited understanding. He'd come from Brennan Industries, a dinosaur of a firm known for their traditional hierarchies and spectacular project failures they'd buried with good PR. The thing is, Grace continued, settling into the chair across from me, he can't actually explain your optimization framework, can he? I was reviewing it yesterday. The mathematics alone would take someone weeks to understand without your background in structural dynamics. I smiled grimly. He's probably in his office right now, frantically Googling terms he doesn't understand. But this went deeper than technical incompetence. Nathan represented everything I'd fought against since walking into Silver Pine with a carefully edited resume. I'd dropped the prestigious internships, minimized my European education, and never once mentioned that Harold Foster had personally trained me since I could hold a pencil. I'd even applied under my mother's maiden name, initially, before HR required legal documentation. All because I wanted to earn my place, to have colleagues respect me for my solutions, not my surname, to know that when clients praised my work, it was because of my capabilities, not my connections. And now Nathan Drake, a man whose engineering knowledge could fit on a cocktail napkin, was telling me I wasn't worthy of presenting my own work. My phone buzzed. An email from Nathan. Please see me in my office at 3 p.m. to discuss your career development. Career development. Code for putting me in my place. I should go, Grace said, but hesitated at the door. Madeline. Be careful. Nathan's been asking questions about everyone's backgrounds, where they studied, who they know. It's like he's building files on us. After she left, I stood at my window, looking out at the city skyline dotted with structures I'd helped design. The Riverside Complex, my first major project. The Hartman Tower, where I'd solved a foundation issue that had stumped 3 senior engineers. The new transit station, my optimization algorithm had saved them $2 million. Nathan Drake thought he could erase all of that with a few dismissive words in a conference room. My computer pinged with another message, this time from Patricia Huang. Ms. Foster, I was impressed with your presentation framework. Might we discuss it privately? I believe Mr. Drake may have been premature in his dismissal. Interesting, but I couldn't respond. Not yet. Not until I understood Nathan's game. At 2:55 p.m., I walked to Nathan's corner office. His assistant, barely looking up from her screen, waved me in. The space screamed compensation. Oversized desk, walls lined with photographs of Nathan with various executives, diplomas from impressive schools that had apparently taught him everything except actual engineering. Madeline, he said without looking up from his computer screen, where I could see he had several browser tabs open to engineering terminology sites. Sit. Like I was a dog, I remained standing. You wanted to discuss my career development? He finally looked up, his expression shifting to surprise, then annoyance at my failure to obey. Yes, I've been reviewing your file. Impressive work history, but some gaps in your background information. Gaps? Your education section is surprisingly sparse, just says Master's in Structural Engineering, State University. No honors mentioned, no thesis advisor, no international experience. Unusual for someone of your claimed expertise. Claimed expertise. My blood pressure spiked, but I kept my face neutral. I prefer to let my work speak for itself, I replied evenly. He leaned back, fingers steepled. You know, I've been doing some research. There was a Madeline Foster who attended École des Ponts Paris-Tech around the time you would have been in university. Studied under some rather prominent names. Same middle initial, too. Curious coincidence. My heart rate didn't change. I'd prepared for this possibility years ago. Foster's a common name. Indeed. His smile was predatory now. Just as it's common in our industry. Harold Foster, for instance. Revolutionary engineer. You wouldn't happen to be. Is there a point to this fishing expedition? I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to make him blink. Because if you're trying to imply I got my position through nepotism, I'd remind you that I was hired through blind technical assessments. My solutions have saved this company millions. My client satisfaction ratings are the highest in the department. So, what exactly are you hoping to find? He leaned forward. I'm trying to understand why someone with your apparent connections would hide them. Unless, of course, you're not actually. What I am, I interrupted again, is the lead engineer who just developed a framework that could revolutionize our bridge construction methodology. What I'm not is someone who needs to justify my presence here to a man who couldn't calculate a load distribution if his life depended on it. His face flushed red. Watch your tone, Miss Foster. I'm still your superior. In title only, I shot back, then reined myself in. This was what he wanted, me, emotional, insubordinate, giving him ammunition. I took a breath, smiled coldly. What did you actually want, Nathan? Because if it's to intimidate me into silence, you've failed. If it's to fish for information about my background, you're wasting both our time. And if it's to assert your authority after that embarrassing display in the conference room, well, how did explaining my framework to the clients go? His jaw clenched. He'd clearly struggled, probably deflected and generalized until Patricia Huang had given up asking technical questions. I'm promoting you, he said suddenly. I blinked. Excuse me? Senior lead engineer, special projects. You'll report directly to me. Work on high visibility initiatives. 40% salary increase. Now I understood. He'd done enough digging to suspect who I might be. And he was trying to buy my compliance. Keep your potential enemies close. Offer them golden handcuffs. That's Unexpected? I said carefully. I recognize talent when I see it. He lied smoothly. Despite our miscommunication earlier, I think you could be valuable to my vision for this department. His vision. The man who'd just humiliated me was now trying to make me his ally because he suspected I might be someone important. The hypocrisy was stunning. I'll need to see the full terms, I said, buying time to think. Of course. But Madeline? He leaned back, confident he'd won. This kind of opportunity doesn't come twice. I'd hate to see talented engineers like yourself, or like young Grace Holden, stuck in dead-end positions because they couldn't recognize when to be team players. There it was. The threat wrapped in silk. Play along or watch your colleagues suffer. I thought of Grace's composite materials project, revolutionary work that Nathan had shelved out of spite and ignorance. I thought of Marcus and Jennifer and all the others Nathan had stepped on. I'll need a condition, I heard myself say. His eyebrows rose. You're negotiating? One condition. You give Grace Holden's composite materials project a fair review, a real review, with the full technical committee present. He laughed. That amateur science experiment? Why would you waste your political capital on... Because it's not amateur, I cut in. It's innovative, and if you'd actually read her proposal instead of dismissing it based on her age and gender, you'd know that. His eyes narrowed, calculating. Fine, I'll review it. Personally. With the technical committee, I insisted. I said I'll review it, he snapped. Take the win, Madeline. Or would you prefer to go back to being dismissed in client meetings? I knew then that Grace's project was doomed. Nathan would conduct his review, find predetermined faults, and bury it deeper than before. But I also knew something else. Nathan Drake had just shown me exactly what kind of enemy he was. Petty, insecure, and completely unaware of the war he'd just escalated. I'll think about your offer, I said, heading for the door. Don't think too long, he called after me. Oh, and Madeline? Give my regards to your father, if you ever speak to him, that is. I paused at the threshold, but didn't turn. He thought he'd won something with that little jab, that bit of implied knowledge. He had no idea what was coming. The private meeting room on the 20th floor had no windows, no distractions, just Nathan, me, and the suffocating weight of his arrogance. He'd summoned me 3 days after our last encounter, clearly having spent the time crafting what he thought would be an irresistible offer. I've drawn up the contract, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Senior lead engineer, special projects. The salary increase we discussed, plus performance bonuses tied to successful project completions. I flipped through the pages, noting the carefully worded clauses. Authority to lead, but every decision required his approval. Visibility on major projects, but no direct client contact without his presence. A golden cage designed to keep me close and controlled. And Grace's project? I asked, not looking up from the contract. Ah, yes, your condition. He pulled out another folder, thinner than the first. I've scheduled a review next Tuesday, 2 p.m. With the full technical committee? His smile was practiced, hollow. I'll be conducting the initial assessment personally. If it shows promise, then we'll involve the committee. Translation: he'd kill it quietly, then claim he gave it fair consideration. I see. I closed the contract folder. Then I have a counter proposal. His eyebrows rose. You're hardly in a position to... I accept the promotion, I interrupted, watching surprise flicker across his face. On one condition. Grace Holden presents her project directly to the technical committee. Not to you first, to the committee. With you present as an observer. That's not how we do things. It's how we're doing this thing, I said firmly. Unless you'd prefer I decline your generous offer and mention to Patricia Huang that you prevented me from discussing my optimization framework further, she seemed quite interested in a private meeting. His face flushed. The City Infrastructure Committee was too valuable a client to risk, and we both knew it. You're overplaying your hand, Madeline. Am I? I leaned back, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Because from where I'm sitting, you need me more than I need this promotion. You can't explain my framework, you can't defend it to clients, and you certainly can't develop anything comparable. So either Grace gets her fair shot, or you can explain to the board why our most innovative engineer walked away from a senior position. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Nathan's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous tell I filed away for future reference. Fine, he said finally, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. Grace can present to the committee, but when her little chemistry project fails to impress, you'll stop wasting my time with these bleeding heart diversity initiatives. Bleeding heart diversity initiatives, as if supporting talented colleagues was somehow a weakness. Of course, I agreed, knowing Grace's work would speak for itself if given the chance. When should I sign? Now. He pushed a pen toward me. Unless you need Daddy's permission first. The taunt was so juvenile I almost laughed. Instead, I picked up the pen and signed with a flourish, then dated it, October 15th. A date I suspected Nathan would come to regret. Excellent. He collected the papers, his smile smug. You start Monday. I'll expect a full briefing on all your current projects and proposals for new initiatives that align with my vision for the department. Your vision, I repeated, which is proven solutions, traditional approaches. No more of this academic experimentation that wastes resources and confuses clients. I bit back the response that traditional approaches were why Brennan Industries had suffered 3 major project failures in 5 years. Nathan didn't want innovation. He wanted stagnation he could understand and control. I'll prepare the briefing, I said, standing to leave. One more thing. His voice stopped me at the door. I know who you are, Madeline. Did you really think you could hide it forever? Harold Foster's daughter, playing at being a regular engineer. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. I never hid it. I simply chose not to advertise it. There's a difference. Is there? Because from what I've learned, you actively concealed your connections, changed your application name, omitted your European education, declined to mention your father trained you personally. That seems like hiding to me. That seems like earning my position based on merit rather than nepotism, I countered. Something you might not understand, given your own career trajectory. His face darkened. Careful. Madeline. You work for me now. I work for Silverpine, I corrected. You're just a temporary obstacle. The words hung in the air, a declaration of war he was too arrogant to fully comprehend. He thought he'd won by discovering my parentage, by forcing me into his controlled environment. He couldn't conceive that I might have accepted his offer for my own reasons. We'll see about temporary, he said coldly. Report to my office Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp, don't be late. I left without another word, but my mind was already racing. Nathan had given me exactly what I needed: proximity to his operations, authority to propose new initiatives, and most importantly, a documented agreement to let Grace present her project. In the elevator, I texted Grace. Committee presentation approved, Tuesday, 2 p.m., start preparing. Her response was immediate. What? How? I'll explain later. Just be ready to blow their minds. As I walked back to my office, I passed the company bulletin board announcing the annual Innovation Challenge, the competition where project teams could submit revolutionary ideas directly to the board of directors, bypassing middle management entirely. Submissions opened in 2 weeks. Nathan thought he'd neutralized a threat by promoting me. Instead, he'd just given me the authority and resources I needed to expose him for what he truly was: a fraud in an expensive suit, desperately trying to suppress anyone who might reveal his incompetence. The real game was just beginning. That evening, I finally called the one person I'd been avoiding since this mess started. Madeline? My father's voice carried across the Atlantic, warm despite the distance. It's been too long, ma chérie. Hi, Dad. I sank into my couch, suddenly exhausted. I might need some advice. About engineering? You know more than I do these days. About politics, I admitted. And dealing with insecure men who think a surname means more than capability. He was quiet for a moment. Someone discovered who you are. My new technical director. He's trying to use it against me. Promoted me to keep me under his thumb. Thinks he has leverage. Ah. I could hear the smile in his voice. And instead, you're going to destroy him. I'm going to let him destroy himself, I corrected. I just need to create the right opportunities. That's my girl, he said proudly. Remember what I taught you about load distribution? The weakest point bears the most stress when the structure shifts, I recited. Exactly. Find his weakest point, then shift the entire structure around it. He'll collapse under his own weight. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, planning. Nathan Drake had no idea what he'd set in motion. He thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but I wasn't playing either game. I was engineering his downfall, one calculated stress point at a time. And unlike his theoretical knowledge, my structural analysis was flawless. The Innovation Challenge announcement poster gleamed under the fluorescent lights as Grace and I stood before it, coffee cups in hand. 2 weeks until submissions opened, 8 weeks until final presentations to the board. The perfect timeline for what I had in mind. I still can't believe Nathan approved my committee presentation, Grace said, shaking her head. What did you do? Threaten to quit? Something like that. I studied the competition rules, noting the clause that made my pulse quicken. Projects must have a designated executive sponsor from senior management. Grace, what if we combined our work? She nearly dropped her coffee. What? Your composite materials, my optimization framework. Together, they could revolutionize how we approach infrastructure, lighter, stronger, more cost-effective structures. That's... She paused, eyes widening as the possibilities hit her. That's brilliant. The weight reduction from my materials would amplify your load distribution benefits exponentially. We could build bridges with half the material at twice the lifespan. Exactly. I lowered my voice. And I know just who to ask as our executive sponsor. Grace looked skeptical. Nathan would never. Oh, but he would. I smiled. He has no idea what your materials actually do. He'll see it as a chance to take credit for mentoring us. Plus, with my new position, he'll want to keep me aligned with his goals. You're going to let him take credit for our work? I'm going to let him think he can, I corrected. There's a difference. That afternoon, I knocked on Nathan's door with a carefully crafted proposal. He looked up from what appeared to be a Engineering for Dummies website hastily minimized on his screen. Madeline, how's the transition briefing coming? Ahead of schedule. I lied smoothly. I actually wanted to discuss an opportunity. The Innovation Challenge. His interest sharpened. Go on. I'm thinking of submitting a project. A combination of structural optimization and new materials. Revolutionary potential. But it needs executive sponsorship. I paused, letting him fill in the blanks. Someone with vision, someone who understands the importance of being associated with game-changing innovation. My optimization framework. He tried to sound knowledgeable. Enhanced by Grace Holden's composite materials, I added casually. Since you're already reviewing her work, you'll see the synergy immediately. His jaw tightened at Grace's name, but I watched him calculate the opportunity. If we won, he'd be the executive who discovered and guided the winning innovation. If we lost, he could distance himself and blame our failure on inexperience. I'd want full oversight, he said finally. Weekly progress meetings, final approval on all design decisions. Of course. I kept my expression neutral. We'd benefit greatly from your strategic input. And the presentation to the board would emphasize my role in bringing together diverse talents and fostering innovation. There it was. His ego, naked and grasping. Naturally, as our executive sponsor, your leadership would be instrumental to our success. He leaned back, already envisioning the accolades. Draft a formal proposal. I'll consider it. 2 days later, Grace's committee presentation exceeded everyone's expectations. Her composite materials weren't just innovative, they were revolutionary. Even the skeptics couldn't argue with her data showing 60% weight reduction while maintaining 140% of traditional strength ratings. Nathan sat in the back, frantically Googling terms on his phone as Grace fielded complex questions he couldn't begin to understand. Exceptional work, Ms. Holden. The committee chair concluded. This could change everything. I caught Nathan afterward, his face a mix of confusion and calculation. I had no idea her work was so advanced, he admitted grudgingly. That's why combining it with structural optimization could be transformative. I pressed. Imagine being the executive who championed this fusion of innovations. His eyes lit up. Yes, I can see it now. My vision for integrating diverse technological approaches. By Thursday, we had his signature as executive sponsor. Grace and I celebrated with drinks at a quiet bar downtown. I still don't understand why you want him involved, she said. He'll try to control everything. Let him try. I raised my glass. He doesn't understand your materials. He doesn't understand my mathematics. He'll be completely dependent on us to explain everything, and that's exactly where I want him. You're playing a dangerous game, Madeline. No, I corrected. I'm engineering a solution. Nathan's like a poorly designed support beam. He looks solid from the outside, but apply the right pressure and he'll buckle. We spent the next 3 weeks developing our proposal. I insisted on documentation for everything, every calculation, every design decision, every innovative element. Nathan attended our progress meetings, nodding sagely at concepts he didn't grasp, and offering strategic guidance that we politely ignored. I want you to emphasize cost savings in the executive summary, he instructed during one session. Boards love cost savings. The cost savings are secondary to the safety improvements, Grace argued. We're talking about infrastructure that could survive Category 5 hurricanes. People assume safety. Nathan dismissed. They want to know about the bottom line. Trust me, I know how executives think. I kicked Grace under the table before she could respond. We'll make sure both aspects are highlighted, I said diplomatically. Later, as Nathan left for another strategic planning session, golf with potential clients, Grace turned to me in frustration. He's going to ruin this. Every suggestion he makes dumbs down the innovation. Document everything, I reminded her. Every email where he misunderstands the technology. Every meeting where he prioritizes flashover function. We're building two things here. An innovation that will change our industry, and a paper trail that shows exactly who understands it and who doesn't. She studied me with new appreciation. You're not just trying to win the competition. I'm an engineer, I said simply. I believe in building things properly, and sometimes that means removing structural weaknesses before they cause a collapse. The submission deadline arrived faster than expected. Our final proposal was a masterpiece. Grace's materials science married perfectly to my optimization algorithms, creating possibilities neither of us had imagined alone. We could build bridges that danced with the wind instead of fighting it, skyscrapers that grew stronger under stress, infrastructure that adapted rather than merely endured. Nathan signed off as executive sponsor without reading past the executive summary, too busy practicing his visionary leader speech for the board presentation. Excellent work, team, he announced grandly. My integration of your diverse skill sets has produced exactly the kind of innovation I envisioned when I brought you together. Grace's eye twitched. I maintained my poker face. Your leadership has been instrumental, I managed. As we submitted the proposal, I made sure Nathan's name was prominently displayed as executive sponsor. Every document, every page, every credit line tied him inexorably to our project. Congratulations, I told him afterward. You're now officially responsible for the most advanced structural innovation Silverpine has seen in a decade. He preened, completely missing the weight of that responsibility. When we win, he said confidently. This will revolutionize how we approach project development. My model of executive sponsorship will become the company standard. I smiled. I'm counting on it. Grace waited until he was gone before turning to me. Please tell me you know what you're doing. Nathan wanted to put me in a box, I replied. Instead, I've put him on a pedestal. It's a long way down from there, and he's about to learn that he's afraid of heights. What if he figures out what you're doing? I thought about the hours Nathan spent trying to understand our proposal, the frantic Google searches, the engineering textbooks hidden in his office drawer. He won't, I said with certainty. He's too busy trying to look like he belongs up there to notice the ground shifting beneath his feet. The Innovation Challenge had officially begun, and Nathan Drake had just volunteered to be our test subject for structural failure analysis. Phase 1 was complete. Nathan was eager, too eager. The moment our joint project was announced as a finalist, he summoned me into his office with a grin stretched too wide to be genuine. Congratulations, Madeline, he began, his voice laced with that thin layer of false camaraderie. It seems you and Grace have cooked up something impressive, and I see you've suggested me as the project overseer? I met his eyes, masking the chill under my polite smile. You're the director. It only felt appropriate. He leaned back in his chair, pleased with himself. Absolutely. Though, I'll need a detailed briefing before the board presentation. Naturally, I'll handle the pitch, but I want to make sure I can answer any follow-up questions. I nodded, careful to keep my expression neutral. Of course, let's schedule a few sessions. The first session started with Nathan lounging in his chair, waving his pen like a conductor waiting for the orchestra. All right, walk me through this so I can translate it into something the board will actually understand. Grace and I exchanged a glance before I launched into the core principles: the modular composite load distribution, dynamic stress adaptation, filtration layering. Nathan nodded along for the first 10 minutes, chiming in with predictable phrases like, right, standard load analysis, or, yes, that's a classic tensile variance issue. But when I moved into how our composite material recalibrated its load tolerance in real time depending on environmental feedback, an innovation Grace had painstakingly modeled, his confident nodding slowed. That's interesting. But the strain ratios wouldn't fluctuate in linear progression under variable moisture conditions. Nathan interrupted, a hint of doubt in his tone. They would, if the composite weave incorporates hydrophilic microlayers, Grace replied evenly. Nathan blinked. Hydrophilic layers? I kept my voice calm. It's in the material brief we submitted last week. We can walk you through the section again, if you'd like. He cleared his throat. No, I just wanted to make sure we're aligned on the terminology. By the end of the first session, Nathan's self-assured front was cracking. We scheduled 2 more. In the second, we dove into pressure dispersion modeling and site variable optimization, concepts that Grace and I knew inside out, but Nathan grasped only in fragmented pieces. We watched as his notebook filled with half-understood scribbles and question marks in the margins. By the third session, his confidence had been replaced with thinly veiled frustration. Look, he snapped halfway through. We can't expect the board to follow this level of technical depth. They'll want an overview, simple points, big picture benefits. I met his stare evenly. The board includes 3 engineers with PhDs. They'll expect precision. Nathan, if the data doesn't hold up under scrutiny, the entire proposal collapses. He pressed his lips into a hard line. Then we'll simplify for the presentation and keep the technical details in an appendix. They can read it later if they're interested. I nodded. As you wish, I'll prepare the appendix for you. But Grace and I already had a different plan. The final presentation rules were clear. The project lead listed on the submission had to personally present and defend the proposal. No assistance from the team during Q&A. We made sure Nathan stayed blissfully unaware of just how tangled he was in his own arrogance. On the morning of the presentation, Nathan walked into the boardroom with practiced confidence, briefcase in hand, flashing the kind of smile reserved for magazine covers and political campaigns. He started strong, reading our carefully crafted slides word for word. But the cracks came quickly. Dr. Ingrid Mason, one of the board members, raised a hand. Mr. Drake, could you elaborate on the real-time strain response mechanism within the composite weave? Nathan's polished exterior flickered. He gave a vague answer about adaptive materials, a phrase he'd repeated often in our sessions, then attempted to pivot to cost savings. Dr. Mason pressed again. Specifically, how does the hydrophilic layer influence microfracture resistance under load variance? Nathan hesitated. Well, as you know, hydrophilic reactions, enhance tensile flexibility in dynamic conditions, which... He trailed off. The room fell into an awkward silence. I could almost hear his confidence fracturing like an overstressed beam. Dr. Mason exchanged a glance with the other board members before she spoke again. Perhaps Ms. Foster and Ms. Holden could elaborate. Nathan had no choice. He forced a smile. Of course. Grace and I rose, stepping to the front. And then, we did exactly what we'd prepared for weeks, delivered a concise, passionate explanation of our system. We handled every question with clarity, our knowledge seamless, our teamwork flawless. By the time we finished, the board members were leaning forward, nodding appreciatively, jotting down notes. Nathan sat quietly, hands folded, his earlier bravado drained away. The following week, the announcement arrived. Our project wasn't just selected, it was selected unanimously. The board's written feedback was displayed in the company newsletter for all to see. Revolutionary design, exceptional technical expertise demonstrated by the development team. And Nathan? He faded into the background, his name attached only as a powerless formality. A director who had been exposed for exactly who he was, a man way out of his depth. Nathan didn't take the board's subtle humiliation quietly. Barely a week after the announcement, he tried to reclaim control. He summoned me to his office under the pretense of project alignment. I've drafted the implementation plan, Nathan said, swiveling his monitor toward me. I've streamlined the presentation for the stakeholder review, cut out some of the denser technical material to keep it accessible. I studied the slides. Gone were the precision diagrams, replaced with vague flowcharts and colorful icons better suited for a high school science fair. Key components of our modular composite system were either mislabeled or omitted entirely. These simplifications create inaccuracies, I said carefully. The stakeholders, especially the municipal chief engineer, will expect technical accuracy. Oversimplifying this could backfire. Nathan waved a hand. We don't want to overwhelm them. Besides, if technical questions come up, you'll be there to assist. I met his eyes. 3 of the 5 stakeholders have advanced engineering degrees. They'll notice discrepancies. And protocol states that the project lead is responsible for presenting both the overview and technical details. His jaw tightened. Fine. Add the technical details, but put them in the appendix. Only bring them up if necessary. I nodded, hiding my real plan. When I returned to my desk, Grace was waiting. I leaned in and whispered, He's setting himself up again. She grinned knowingly. What's the move? We'll prepare the full technical presentation, separate file. When the questions come, we'll let the data speak for itself. The stakeholder meeting was set for the following Thursday. Nathan kicked it off with his signature confidence, pacing in front of the screen, gliding through the oversimplified slides. For about 5 minutes, everything went his way, until Rachel Vaughn, the municipal chief engineer, raised her hand. This overview omits the load recalibration mechanics that differentiate your system from conventional models. Can you elaborate on that process, Mr. Drake? Nathan froze for a split second before flashing his well-practiced smile. Of course, the recalibration functions by adjusting dynamically to external stress factors in real time, ensuring optimal flow distribution. A pause. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. That sounds rather generic. Could you clarify the exact mechanism by which the composite weave accommodates torsional variances under fluctuating load conditions? Nathan blinked, glanced at me, panic flickering in his eyes, then turned back to the table. Actually, I spoke up calmly, opening my laptop. I've prepared detailed diagrams that might help illustrate the system's recalibration process. Nathan gave a tight nod. Yes, Madeline will walk you through those specifics. For the next 40 minutes, Grace and I led the technical discussion, explaining everything from strain response curves to adaptive reinforcement layering. The stakeholders leaned in, asked sharp questions, and we answered them all with the ease of people who had lived and breathed the project for months. Nathan stood at the edge of the room, reduced to the occasional awkward interjection of, "Exactly, as we intended." Or, "That's the advantage we identified." By the end of the session, it was painfully clear who held the real expertise. As we packed up, Rachel approached me directly. "Ms. Foster, I'd appreciate it if we could set up a separate technical briefing with you and your team for the Municipal Oversight Committee." Nathan stepped forward. "All technical communications will be routed through the project director, of course." Rachel smiled politely but firmly. "Certainly. But for technical questions, I'll expect to liaise directly with Ms. Foster. Efficiency matters, after all." I didn't miss the way Nathan's mouth pressed into a thin, bloodless line. This scene repeated itself in every subsequent meeting. Nathan would begin with polished summaries, stumble at the first complex question, and reluctantly yield the floor to Grace or me. Each time, our credibility grew, while his slipped further into the shadows. 3 months into implementation, we hit our first major snag. Unforeseen groundwater conditions under one of the primary sites threatened to derail the schedule. Nathan called for an emergency team meeting. "This changes everything," he declared, pacing in front of the whiteboard. "We'll need to revert to conventional structural methods for this section to avoid further delays." Grace raised her hand. "Actually, we anticipated variable site conditions. Our modular design allows for on-site recalibration of the composite framework to adapt without major structural changes." Nathan didn't even look at her. "That's too risky. We can't gamble with untested methods on critical infrastructure." "It's not untested," I countered, keeping my voice even. "We accounted for this during the design phase. Our adaptability model is precisely why the system won the innovation challenge." Nathan shook his head. "Theory isn't the same as practice. I've made my decision." I nodded slowly. "Understood. Then we'll need to notify the stakeholders about the change in method and get their approval for the increased budget and extended timeline." Nathan's head snapped toward me. "Is that necessary?" "Absolutely. Abandoning the approved design means higher costs and at least a 5-week delay. Stakeholder approval is mandatory." He paled. The project was under constant scrutiny. Management had made it a flagship case study for innovation and efficiency. Nathan stared at the whiteboard, then finally said, "Let's review your proposal again before making a final call." Grace's reconfiguration worked flawlessly. The groundwater issue was resolved without delay. Nathan had to stand by and watch as Grace led the adjustments and earned the praise from the municipal inspectors. The cracks in Nathan's authority weren't just showing anymore. They were widening by the day. By the end of the second week, Charlotte barely had time to breathe between onboarding calls and client transition meetings. What had started as a few curious inquiries had evolved into a calculated migration. Nexora's leadership was watching the numbers with a mixture of astonishment and quiet urgency. Evan Hart called it a tectonic shift in a strategy meeting. Charlotte called it what it was: a reckoning. Client after client signed with Nexora. Contracts that once bore Virexon's letterhead now carried Nexora's logo, and every signature felt like a thread unraveling from the fabric of Gavin Rhodes's empire. But Charlotte didn't celebrate, not publicly, not even in private. She simply worked. She guided new teams, aligned client strategies, and executed seamless transitions. No grand announcements, no social media bravado, just precise, relentless execution. By the 14th day, whispers turned into headlines in the Denver business circuit. Nexora gains momentum as Virexon accounts defect. Leadership missteps lead to client exodus at Virexon Technologies. The Charlotte Effect: How One Executive Reshaped the Market in 2 Weeks. Her inbox filled with inquiries from journalists, analysts, even recruiters who wanted to hear her story. Charlotte ignored them all. This wasn't about becoming a headline. It was about correcting a long-standing imbalance, one Gavin had fed for years. Inside Virexon, the cracks deepened. A former colleague, Melissa Park, sent Charlotte a brief message through LinkedIn. "It's chaos in there. Gavin's losing it. They're blaming everyone but themselves." Charlotte read it once, closed the message, and didn't reply. By week 3, Nexora had absorbed nearly half of Virexion's key client list. Revenue projections shifted. Market analysts revised forecasts, and the board of directors at Virexon started making frantic moves, replacing mid-level managers, pushing Gavin into high-pressure meetings, trying desperately to plug holes in a sinking ship. Evan Hart called Charlotte into his office late one Friday afternoon. The Denver skyline stretched wide behind him as he stood by the window, arms folded. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked quietly. Charlotte didn't hesitate. "I didn't plan to burn their house down," she said. "I just stopped holding it up for them." Evan gave a single nod, one of understanding, not approval. "You're shifting our entire market position," he said. "We're going to restructure around your accounts. I want you at the center of that." Charlotte met his gaze with calm clarity. "I'm ready." As she left his office, the hallway was quiet, the hum of the city pulsing beyond the glass walls. For the first time in years, Charlotte didn't feel like she was holding her breath. She wasn't running, she wasn't surviving, she was leading. And as for Virexon, they hadn't just lost their clients, they'd lost the person who had kept them afloat for far longer than they ever deserved. Now, the fallout wasn't her concern. By the time the project neared completion, our results spoke louder than any presentation Nathan could ever give. Water quality metrics surpassed all initial projections, improving by over 40%, and operational costs dropped nearly 30%. Even the most skeptical municipal officials began referring to our system as the Silver Pine model, praising its innovation and adaptability in public reports. Local media picked up the story. Headlines like "Next-Gen Infrastructure, Silver Pine's Breakthrough" ran in the regional news. Municipal officials gave interviews, openly crediting the forward-thinking engineers behind the project, naming Grace and me specifically. Nathan wasn't mentioned. Then came the call that would shift everything. Late one evening, I received a message from Gareth Linton, the county executive overseeing regional development. "Madeline," he greeted warmly. "I wanted to reach out personally. The success of this project caught the attention of our neighboring counties. They're proposing an expanded implementation across 3 counties, but they're requesting you as the lead." I sat back, stunned. "Me, not the company, or the project director." Gareth chuckled. "Your director's been fine, I'm sure. But the commissioners want the person who actually understands this system leading the expansion. They've made that a formal condition. You'll still work through Silverpine, of course, but you'll be named project leader." I thanked him, my heart pounding. The next morning, Nathan stood in front of a packed conference room, giving what he clearly believed was his triumphant project debrief to the executives, investors, and county representatives. He walked them through a polished overview of the project's outcomes, his voice brimming with forced enthusiasm. Then Gareth stood and cleared his throat. "We're excited to move forward with this system," Gareth said, smiling. "In fact, we're prepared to fund a multi-county rollout, with one stipulation: we'd like Ms. Foster to lead the initiative." The silence was instant and heavy. Nathan blinked, forcing a professional smile. "Of course, Ms. Foster is an exceptional member of our team, but as her director, I'd naturally oversee." Gareth shook his head gently. "I'm afraid not. We're quite clear on this point. Ms. Foster's leadership is a non-negotiable part of our proposal." The executive board members exchanged quiet glances. Nathan froze, eyes darting between them and me. When the meeting ended, Nathan practically dragged me into a side office. His face had lost its usual smugness, replaced by something more brittle. This creates an awkward reporting structure, he began, his voice low. Having you lead a project of this scale outside of my purview, it's problematic for the chain of command. Perhaps we should suggest a co-leadership arrangement. I folded my arms, keeping my expression carefully neutral. The client made their expectations very clear. Nathan's jaw worked. I have far more management experience than you, Madeline. That should count for something. It does. I agreed calmly. But the counties are prioritizing technical expertise over managerial experience. They've seen the results for themselves. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening. The CEO wants me upstairs. Now. He left without another word. The following morning, the announcement landed in every Silverpine employee's inbox. Silverpine Structural Solutions was forming a new innovation implementation division. I was named division head. Grace was appointed deputy director. Our division would oversee not only the expanded multi-county project, but all future municipal innovation initiatives. Nathan retained his title, Director of Conventional Engineering, but his scope was reduced to legacy projects and maintenance contracts. The internal memo included a quote from the CEO himself. This restructuring allows us to harness the outstanding innovation and technical leadership demonstrated by Ms. Foster and Ms. Holden, while maintaining our commitment to proven methodologies under Mr. Drake's continued leadership of conventional operations. In corporate speak, Nathan had just been publicly sidelined, demoted without losing his title. His career path at Silverpine slammed shut in front of the entire company. Meanwhile, our new division received double the resources of any standard department. We hired a team of engineers, handpicked for their creative problem-solving and collaborative mindset. Our workspace was moved to the renovated East Wing, complete with advanced research labs and open, flexible workspaces designed for innovation. Nathan didn't try to confront me again. At least, not yet. ChatGPT Noi. 3 weeks after the reorganization, Nathan finally reappeared, this time knocking on the glass door of my new office. He stood in the doorway, hands clasped, wearing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The sharp designer suits were gone, replaced with something more subdued. Thanks for seeing me, he began, settling into the chair across from my desk, the same desk where he'd once dismissed me as a junior engineer. I folded my hands. Of course, what can I do for you? Nathan cleared his throat. I've been following the division's progress. The initiatives you and your team are leading. They're impressive. He hesitated. I've been considering my future at Silverpine. I'd like to request a transfer to the Innovation Implementation Division. I believe I can contribute in a meaningful way. There it was, the moment I hadn't expected but knew would come. The man who once silenced me in front of clients now asking to work under my leadership. I kept my tone even. Interesting. And what kind of contribution do you envision making here? Nathan shifted in his seat. Project management, process oversight. I think my experience could complement the technical strengths of your team. I nodded thoughtfully. We've developed new project protocols that reduce implementation time by 40%. The team's collaborative structure is a big part of that success. We evaluate ideas based on merit, not hierarchy. I held his gaze. Are you comfortable in that environment? Absolutely, Nathan said quickly. I've always valued open collaboration. I didn't bother challenging the lie. I'll discuss it with the team and let you know. That evening, I met with Grace. You're seriously considering this? She asked, eyebrows raised. I am, I replied, but not for the reasons he thinks. Grace tilted her head, waiting. If we shut him out, he'll stay the same. But if he works under this system, if he's forced to see every day that real leadership is built on merit, not status, he might actually change. Or at least, he'll be part of a system where he can't hurt anyone else. Grace smirked. And where exactly do you plan to put him? I smiled. I think the filtration optimization team could use another member, under your direct supervision. Her eyes widened, then she broke into a slow grin. You want him reporting to me? Only if you're comfortable with it. I'll manage, Grace said, her voice steady. A week later, Nathan received the formal notice. Transfer approved, Senior Project Coordinator. Reporting to Deputy Director Grace Holden. Filtration Optimization Division. On his first day, I watched him settle into the open-plan workspace we designed. No private offices, no closed doors, no hierarchical trappings. Even I worked at a desk like everyone else, separated only by glass partitions to maintain visibility. Nathan learned quickly that in our division, ideas were submitted anonymously for review. Feedback was direct, constructive, and based purely on merit. Project teams were mixed across experience levels, and credit was shared every single time. At first, Nathan tried to assert himself in discussions, leaning on his old habits of speaking over others or appealing to experience. But when that approach got him nowhere, something started to shift. He began listening more, talking less, actually contributing, instead of dominating. 3 months in, he suggested a minor adjustment to a distribution protocol during a team workshop. The suggestion worked, and Grace acknowledged his input publicly during the next division meeting, alongside everyone else's. I caught a flicker of something in Nathan's expression that day. Gratitude. Maybe even relief. A few weeks later, I stayed late to finish reports and saw Nathan at a corner workstation, helping a junior engineer troubleshoot a complex simulation. They were bent over a screen together, sketching notes and bouncing ideas off each other like equals. As he packed up to leave, Nathan noticed me watching. He approached hesitantly. I wanted to say, "Thank you," he began, "for giving me a chance to see things differently. I understand now about evaluating ideas on merit, about giving space for fresh perspectives. I was wrong before." I gave him a small nod. "I appreciate you saying that." Nathan exhaled slowly. "This division runs the way engineering should. I wish I'd understood that sooner." I met his gaze. Good engineering isn't about control. It's about collaboration, about finding the best solution, no matter who it comes from. He nodded, thoughtful. "I'll remember that." As he turned to go, I called after him. "Your modification for the East Side distribution, good work. You should develop that further." Nathan's expression softened. "Thank you, Madeline." He left. I sat back, letting the moment settle. My revenge hadn't been about humiliating Nathan or driving him out. It had been about building a system where people like Grace, and even people like Nathan, could learn, contribute, and grow. In the end, the best kind of power isn't crushing someone under your success. It's building something so strong they have no choice but to change or be left behind. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this and feel free to share your thoughts. I can't wait to hear from you.